Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So Star Wars The Last Jedi has introduced some very interesting concepts, including one that could potentially change the galaxy and Star Wars combat forever. Dun dun dun! VIII Admiral Holdo, in a last-ditch effort to protect the Resistance, launched the Mon Calamari Cruiser Raddus into hyperspace and aimed it directly at Snoke's ship, causing a collision at many times faster than the speed of light. Not only shattered the mega-class Star Dreadnought Supremacy, the debris from the impact spread across the rest of the fleet, destroying several other Star Destroyers. It was probably one of the most deadly attacks ever made without using a superweapon like the Death Star. It killed a lot of people. I'm talking like genocide numbers here, okay? But we all just sat there in the theater anyway and applauded because they were the bad guys. Something to think about. Now, this is a plan that fans have been talking about for quite a while. We even talked about it in one of our videos before The Last Jedi even released. I would instead just come out of hyperspace right next to this ship. Why don't they just do that in every movie? Why don't they just send a freighter right through the Death Star at hyperspace speed? Wouldn't that destroy it? I mean, there's no way to defend it. The first Star Wars film would have ended like 20 minutes sooner. But for some reason, it's never been done. From a practical standpoint, I can see how hyperspace ramming opens a whole new bag of issues. It's like when the United States first dropped the atomic bomb. It was a game changer. It made conventional weapons seem a lot less useful. And with the invention of hyperspace ramming, suddenly ship-to-ship combat seems a bit silly. There's the fear that all future battles after hyperspace ramming will be over in a matter of minutes, with fleets using hyperdrives to snipe each other over vast distances. All the awesome dogfights and broadside turbo laser exchanges that we love would be relegated to the history books, and no one really wants to see that happen. So what do we do now in a post-VIII Admiral Holdo world? How do we prevent space battles from being terrible? How does one stop hyperspace ramming? Well, first we have to look at how hyperdrives work and how the VIII Admiral was able to do what she did. Hyperdrives are extremely complicated machines. I'm not even sure if the creators of Star Wars understand how they work, but we kind of broke down how it works in another video. You can check that out in the corner here, somewhere around there. There's a little circle. Click on that. But anyway, at a basic level, hyperdrives propel ships into another dimension known as hyperspace. This allows the ship to travel at incredible FTL speeds. But traveling at such speeds is a dangerous prospect. Space isn't empty. It's full of debris, planets, skywalkers, gravitational anomalies that can really mess up your ship. It wasn't uncommon for ships back in the day to just disappear after entering hyperspace. Early spacers started realizing that they needed to plot hyperspace routes so that people could travel around safely. At first, this was done by brave pilots who cautiously did micro jumps to map out small areas. Eventually, people started using probe droids, which was a lot safer, and these would be used to automatically seek out new hyperspace lanes. The result was an entire network of hyperspace lanes were created, and that's mostly what pilots use during the present time. Other safety inventions were also invented, including a failsafe that was placed on a hyperdrive that could detect gravity fields. Once it detected a gravity field, it would automatically pull the ship out of hyperspace, preventing any collision from, say, a black hole. This was a huge leap in hypersafe safety. It's like when we first invented seatbelts. Before that, people were just flying through windshields and falling out of airplanes. It was nuts. This limiter wasn't just something that was governed by a switch though, it was an integral part of the hyperdrive and only a really talented mechanic knew how to disable it. And even then, you had to be kind of crazy to disable it in the first place. Han Solo most likely disabled the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive limiter when he pulled off that crazy jump to get through Starkiller Base's shield. VIII Admiral Holdo probably did the same thing in order to crash her ship into the Supremacy. Now, despite what you think, there is a way to stop people from being dickheads and ramming into you at hyperspace speeds, but it's not cheap. There is a class of ship known as the Interdictor class, and it's been used since the Old Republic era. This type of ship had one or more gravity well generators which could mimic the gravity signatures of celestial bodies. These fields were powerful enough to kick off the failsafe mechanisms in hyperdrives and cause ships to exit hyperspace and prevent them from leaving as well. The interdictors were used effectively to cut off traffic on popular hyperspace routes or keep enemy fleets from escaping during a battle. Now, as we discussed before, VIII Admiral Holdo most likely disabled the hyperdrive failsafe on her ship, but there is one other way to stop her. Later interdictor models during the Imperial era had multiple gravity well generators and had the ability to rip ships out of hyperspace and didn't depend on triggering failsafe mechanisms. They did this by sending a concentrated gravitational wave that could disturb the quantum field that surrounds a hyperspace traveling ship in the same way a physical object would. The quantum field was what kept the hyperspace tunnel open for the ship to travel through. Once it was collapsed, the ship had no choice but to revert to real space. So I think that is the most practical way of stopping hyperspace ramming. It's not a perfect solution though, because interdictors are typically quite large vessels and expensive. They also have gravity wells which require a great amount of energy, making these large ships a liability in a combat situation. A counter tactic that could be used effectively against an interdictor is for the enemy fleet to send bombers and fighters in to disable the interdictor in a slash and run attack, which would open the entire fleet to hyperspace ramming attacks. It's kind of similar to how in our world, air forces first destroy enemy anti-air installations before sending in more vulnerable bombers. So in order to counter that kind of attack, it might be preferable to set up a second line of defense in case the interdictor fails. Maybe they can use something similar to active armor like we have on tanks. Ships emit corona radiation before reverting to real space from hyperspace. A ship could be fitted with corona radiation detectors, and upon detecting the vector of an incoming hyperspace vessel, they could send their own hyperspace vessel at that one and intercept it. Ideally, you would create some identification friend or foe tags for the friendly ship so that this system doesn't just destroy every ship that comes into contact with it. Well guys, that's my idea of how we can stop hyperspace ramming, because it kind of sucks. Should be interesting to see how Star Wars reacts to the introduction of this new concept. There's probably going to be a lot of retconning, maybe introducing some new technology. Don't forget to subscribe and like us on Facebook, and a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. Remember guys, never take the easy way out. I know hyperspace ramming seems like a great way to destroy your enemies, but there's nothing better than getting into a close-range knife fight in your X-Wing. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.